You're listening to the Full Circle Music Show, the why of the music biz. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Full Circle Music Show, where Seth and I interview the best and the brightest in the music biz. Today we have entertainment lawyer Jason Turner on the line with us, and we're really excited to talk to him because we've discussed a lot with mix engineers and producers and songwriters, but we really get into a lot of detail about what happens from a music business perspective, specifically music law. He represents a who's who in the music business, from OneRepublic to the Backstreet Boys. He's worked with NBC's The Voice, as well as sporting teams and all sorts of things. So the guy knows what he's talking about and goes into a lot of detail about how you as an artist need to look at entertainment law, and also if you're looking to go into entertainment law, what kind of certifications or specifications you will need to go to the next level and to gain that experience to break into the music biz. Really actionable content, a lot of good stories and experience that he shares here in the episode. So I'm looking forward to you hearing it, and let us know what you think as well. So without further ado, Jason Turner on the Full Circle Music Show.
Hey podcast listeners, something's coming February 1st, 2016. Have you ever thought about a career in songwriting or music production? We have created a couple courses with you guys in mind. We've been getting a lot of feedback on people wanting to know more of how to become a songwriter, how to become a professional music producer or engineer. These courses were designed to answer some of those questions. Go to fullcirclemusic.org/podcast and sign up there for more information. So we got Jason Turner here with us in the house today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. And we were just talking about, for those of you guys who don't know, Jason Turner is a rock star entertainment attorney. And why don't you just tell us a little bit of your story? I mean, maybe include some of the highlights of your career and just some of the clients maybe you work with, that, if you don't have to change any names for legal purposes.
Sure. And thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe I can start a little bit about how I got to where I am.
That's perfect.
Because I think my background is a little bit unique in that I don't come from a family of lawyers or family of people in the entertainment industry, though some may think they're entertainers otherwise. But
So you didn't have parents breathing down your neck either. You're going to be a lawyer or a doctor.
No, not at all. I actually was signed up to go to flight school out in Arizona when I was in high school. I wanted to be a pilot. Wow. And the summer before my senior year of high school, one of my favorite country groups at the time, who was on A&M Records, just so happened to be coming through my very small town of 2,000 people for the summer festival thing. And I happened to meet the guys. I kind of weaseled my way in with the fair promoters so I could, do work that day and
cool.
meet the guys. And that was the first time I had even known that there was anything called the music business. It never even hit me at that point. And I had played, I grew up playing piano, so, music was in my life since I could walk, essentially. But through that, at the time, the group was managed by Reba's husband, Narvel Blackstock. And so through that, I started researching a little bit. Ironically, the week after I met them, I was out at the flight school for a camp that was, essentially like a preview for their college. So I had a great experience at that, but while I was out there, the entire week, all I could think about was getting back home because I wanted to learn more about, okay, how do I keep doing this?
Oh, wow.
I thought the glamour job at that point was being a tour manager, which I now realize is a very important role. But
Sure.
Back then, I was like, I want to go be a tour manager. So I ended up going out. I kept in touch with that band and went out with them a few more times that summer, and then found out that Belmont University existed. So knowing I was already signed up to go to flight school, we decided to go ahead and come to Nashville, check it out, checked MTSU out, and at that point, I kind of decided this is absolutely what I need to do.
Wow.
Fast forward, I ended up working for Warner Brothers Records in Nashville while I was in college, and ended up taking over their secondary radio promotion. I happened to go in at the time when secondary meant a lot more, unfortunately, than it does today. And they didn't have anybody doing that radio promotion.
No listener left behind. What's
Exactly.
secondary radio promotion? Explain that.
Sorry. Secondary would be if a major market is Chicago. Secondary would be, say, Rockford, which is 100 miles west of Chicago. So it's the secondary markets are those markets, the smaller markets that surround the major cities.
I see.
And, you know, they still mean a lot to record labels and artists today because in every secondary market, guess what? There's a Walmart, as they used to say. Now, you know, it's all the more important because you don't even need Walmart anymore.
Yeah.
All you need is a computer. But especially in country music, secondary markets have always meant a lot more because country radio is much more focused on the rural communities as a general sort of thing.
It sounds like even so with that concert that happened in your small town,
Right.
that probably would not have happened without the...
Exactly. I would have had no clue who that group was had it not been for that radio station in my small market area.
Sure.
So I had a blast doing that. Worked on the very first Faith Hill and Tim McGraw tour. That was in 1999. I was kind of known as the kid at Warner Brothers, which was good and bad. I probably looked like I was 10 at the time. I only look 13 now.
Exactly. I was going to say the age has progressed a couple years since then.
But ultimately, Warner was also a great experience because I lived through the AOL Time Warner merger. And again, around 2000 or so is when that happened. And the result of that, in Nashville at least, was a lot of people who had been with the company for a very long time, in a kind way, I can say, took early retirement. And so there were a lot of changes, and I ended up leaving and realized I didn't want to work as hard as I had worked. And by hard, I mean with the passion that I had, only to potentially have somebody 2,000 miles away decide one day that my services were no longer needed. And that's kind of when the light bulb went off in my head of what can I do to have a little more control over my life and in a professional sense, but still be involved in the music industry because I absolutely loved it and I knew that's where I wanted to be. And so I started thinking about, you know, how can I do that? And it came to me that every time I was with one of my artists at Warner Brothers, they were always, I hate to use the word complaining, but they were complaining that, you know, one instance was, man, I've been signed to the label for 8 years and I still don't have a record out. Or, man, I've got, you know, this manager who I just can't stand, but I've got 3 more years in my deal. You know, I'm stuck and they're not doing anything for me. And that's kind of where the realization went off of, well, wait a minute, you know, maybe I can be that guy to help prevent things like that from happening. And I honestly don't know where it came from. Maybe a little divine intervention of, hey, Jason, go to law school, be a lawyer. And so did the law school thing, came back. I practiced a little bit in Orlando and Tampa, came back to Nashville, and 5 years ago, this June, our entertainment group started our own law firm.
Wow.
And it's been great. I absolutely love what I do. Every day is different.
So you said when you came to Nashville, you were actually going to school. Which did you decide on, Belmont or MTSU?
I went to Belmont, thanks to my dad, I think in part, because at the time, though I think this has changed today, at the time Belmont was the only one of the 2 schools that offered a business degree.
Okay.
And my dad, being a very wise businessman, said, if we're going to spend this kind of money to send you to school, you're going to have a business degree. And my understanding is MTSU has kind of altered their program to look a lot more like Belmont.
Gotcha. Yeah. So went to Belmont with emphasis on business, so you could eventually pay your dad back.
Right, right. Well, as I always say, their payback's going to come when the nursing home time comes. I'll put them in a little bit nicer one than otherwise.
Sure.
As I always like to say to my mom, Shady Pines.
They'll get the penthouse suite.
Yeah, really. It sounds like from your background that to decide to come to Nashville to pursue this was a passion.
Absolutely.
But when you started being around those artists and hearing the issues that they were having from a legal perspective, that's a big step to decide to go back and to school for what, 2, 3, 4 years?
3 years.
Yeah, to get that. That seems, from a passion standpoint, that's one thing, but how selfless of you to go back and dedicate 3 years to educating yourself so you could help other people.
Yeah, and I hate to talk about it only because it makes me sound a little bit cheesy, but it really is true. One of the greatest rewards that I get is helping my clients. Everybody has issues, and if I can take the problems of my artists or producers or whoever my clients are, if I can take their problems away from them and say, go do what you're good at doing and I'll take care of this and don't worry about it until I call you again, that's what I love doing.
Wow.
Because I'd like to think that's what I'm good at. So if that's what I'm good at, let me do that. You go do what you're good at and go create some stuff, because I do believe music's an important thing in everybody's lives, and everybody that I represent has something to do in that creative element of creating music.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. No, I mean, in my short time of knowing you, I get the sense that it's almost like you have a holistic view. I think a lot of entertainment attorneys can kind of get hung up on, this deal's not good, don't sign it. But it seems like you kind of generally take a long-term approach with artists' careers and producers' careers and songwriters' careers. And it seems like by your track record, that's panned out pretty well. Some examples of that being, Ryan Tedder and Backstreet Boys, and you were with Ryan from the beginning, right? Yeah,
my law partner was with Ryan back when Ryan was an intern at DreamWorks.
Wow.
And so, that's a relationship, and not just speaking for myself, but our firm as a whole, we do try very hard to not look at any of our clients as just a file on the desk or just doing a one-off deal and then being out of each other's lives. I personally believe the more we can be involved with the entire career, both personally and professionally, the better off it's going to be for that client. If we have an artist who also is a songwriter, but also wants to be a producer, that's all stuff that we need to know on the front end, especially these days with as overreaching as some deals can get.
Yeah.
So, I always tell my clients, hey, I want to know anything and everything I can about what you're doing to the extent you want me to know that, and just know that the more I know, the more I'm going to be able to help you. And I think that has been proven in the fact that the extreme majority of the clients we've been with for a very long time. It's very, very, very rare that I have a client where it's just a one-off, do a deal and then I never see them again.
Sure.
And frankly, part of that is me, because if I see that's the type of work that it's going to be, quite frankly, I probably won't take it because it's more important to me to keep my time available for people I'm working with for the long term than carving out a couple weeks of time to work on one deal with somebody who I may never see again.
Right. With that, I'm thinking of you're talking about a long-term approach to an artist's career or a band's career. How have you seen in the music industry that an artist can prolong their career when they avail themselves of your services versus trying to worry through those headaches themselves. You said in the early days that you saw and heard so many stories of people just, I can't get out of this deal. And so I know that's got to hurt and cripple the creative process, because they, often people can't be their full creative selves if they're thinking about that thing that's, holding them down. So have you seen that actually be able to prolong a person's career and make them more prolific or more successful?
I think what I've been able to bring to the table, and I had one artist very recently go through this, has a major label deal, publishing deal, was with a manager, and that manager just wasn't working out. And it was a very tough thing for that artist, because that artist is a very loyal person, which I hate to say is hard to find in this business, especially when success hits. People's priorities can change. But in this particular instance, we not only, thankfully, had set up the original management deal to allow for a fairly easy out, so to speak, with that agreement, which then allows that artist to go get somebody else without it being detrimental to them financially.
Sure.
In other words, putting it simply, they don't have to pay twice. And so I think, when I'm working on any type of deal, I don't have my blinders on saying, okay, this is a record deal. All I'm worried about is how much you're getting paid, what's your royalty, blah, blah, blah. I'm actually thinking about, okay, well, part of what I'm thinking about is what's the absolute worst case thing that could happen? Mm-hmm. On a recording deal, the absolute worst thing that could possibly happen, I'm sure people can come up with different scenarios, but, what I've seen is you get one single that's put out and then you're dropped. So, I'm always thinking about what can I put in to protect my artists in the worst case scenario, so that if that happens, we're not spending a year trying to unwind a deal. And because every moment that an artist loses is a tougher, or let's say it's another nail in the coffin. And I don't want to have an artist who just had their first shot and then all of a sudden find out they're never going to have a career because they can't get out of a deal, or getting out of that deal means they're never going to be able to get another deal.
Gosh, yeah.
Well, in baseball, if you hit a 300, that puts you in the Hall of Fame, right?
Right.
I mean, that means you've missed 7. So
Right.
if you just get one shot and that's it, that doesn't seem like a very realistic way to go nowadays, because it takes a lot more than that.
It does, and I've another one of my clients has had 2 major label deals, has had a couple very big hits, but unfortunately, in one instance, the first label closed. In the next instance, there was a regime change. So, now they're doing everything on their own through a label services partner, which is, they own their masters, and the label services company essentially provides support. Again, that's kind of how the business has started to change a little bit, but, it's being able to help. I think my radio background has been able to help a lot of my artists understand, what does it mean to put out a record? It's not just about being in the studio and recording a hit. Well, what do you do after that? And what does that mean? Does it make sense to spend $10,000 a month on an independent radio staff? And if so, is that radio staff, do they have a proven record? Because I see so many people who spend so much money and they've got nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
So I think, again, just the outlook, the long-term thing, I'm always looking at what's the end game and then trying to work backwards.
Sure.
Yeah.
For a new artist or an artist that's establishing themselves and they've never needed the services or didn't think they needed the services thus far of an attorney, where do you say for your artists or potential people that are just out there listening that now you need an attorney now? You need to have someone in your camp looking over this kind of stuff because this is getting too deep. What does that look like as far as you giving advice to someone like it may not be me, but you need to find somebody that's going to take care of you.
Right. And that's a great question. And honestly, that's a question I get asked a lot. The self-serving answer would be, you always need a lawyer.
Sure.
Today.
The reality is, if you are getting to the point where somebody is asking you to sign some document, it's probably going to be really wise for you to invest a couple $100 to have somebody look over it who knows what they're doing.
Sure.
And no disrespect to anybody in particular, but just having a family friend who happens to be a lawyer, maybe they do. I'm not even going to name other areas of law to just so I don't offend people, but
Sure.
It sounds cliche, but this business is literally changing every day.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's really important to find somebody who is invested in this business and knows what they're doing to look over things. I last year had the privilege of working on The Voice, and I heard so many horror stories from the contestants. One in particular I'll never forget came up to us. We were walking into the restaurant next to the hotel one night, and he kind of stopped us outside, and he's like, "Hey, I need your help." And he went on to describe the situation where he had been basically a street singer, and somebody had offered to invest, give him money to live on and try to get him to the next level. But they wanted half of his income forever.
Wow.
And guess what? He signed some agreement with them.
Wow.
And all they had to do was get him a meeting with an agent. That's
Wow.
all they had to do.
Per the deal.
Per the deal.
Yeah.
And, it's not that hard to get a meeting with an agent.
Yeah.
And it didn't say it had to be a William Morris or a CAA or UTA or Paradigm.
Yeah.
It was just an agent.
Wow. Gosh.
And I mean, that it made me sick because, and it made me sick for two reasons. One, this kid, all he wanted to do was sing. That's all he cared about. He just wanted people to know him as a singer. But it also made me sick to know that there's people out there who would take advantage of this kid in that way. And the reality is, there are people out there who will do that. So, I always suggest if you get to a point where somebody's saying, "Hey, we need to memorialize this agreement. I need you to sign this document." It's like having car insurance. You hope you never need it, but when you need it, you're really thankful it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it sounds self-serving, but it's so worth it to spend $200, $300, $400 just to make sure that something like that disastrous isn't going to happen. Because the one thing I can guarantee, I can't guarantee a lot of things as a lawyer. I can guarantee you it's going to be cheaper for you to pay a lawyer on the front end than to pay a lawyer on the back end to try to unwind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's that same thing where these days I hear a lot about eating healthy or, taking care of your body because it's a lot cheaper. It may look more expensive to go to the organic aisle versus just buying whatever, but it's going to pay you dividends in the long run when you're having to pay for hospital bills and medication as you get older.
I'm expecting Whole Foods at some point to put out a commercial about that, lower your insurance premiums by shopping here.
Yeah, exactly.
This segment's brought to you by Whole Foods.
Yeah. I'm surprised that hasn't been the case yet. So what you're kind of saying, or what I'm hearing you say, is artists and creatives are really by nature just idealists. We see the world a certain way, and we see how it should be or how we think it should be.
Right.
And
You're always looking for the best in people.
Yes, exactly. And you're that guy who says, look for the worst in people.
As I often say, I am not a pessimist. I'm a realist.
There you go. Absolutely.
The
That's
reality is what it is, unfortunately.
Sure.
And look, another thing I always tell my clients, it doesn't matter whether, and man, Seth, you've probably been in this position. No deal is ever going to be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you think you have a perfect deal, I'm sure you can find a lawyer that finds something in there that's not perfect.
Right.
So, our job is to try to get it as close to perfect, or as I like to call it, palatable.
Yeah.
Get it to where, I don't like to lose sleep and beat people up over very little things or things that are incredibly unlikely to happen.
Yeah.
But that said, there are some things that, because I've been around this business now for 19 years, I've seen a lot of things happen.
Sure.
And so while it may seem very remote, there are times where I've had to talk to clients to say, look, you may not think this is going to happen, but let me tell you this story, just to get them to understand why I may be encouraging them to hold the line on X, Y, or Z.
Sure.
It may seem very remote, but we see things every day that happen with deals, and as I see quite frequently these days, deals change from deal to deal. I did 2 deals with one label within a few months of each other, and by the time the first one was done, the second one had already been changed as a direct result of certain things happening in the industry.
Gosh.
There's new language that was in there.
Sure.
What are some of the biggest changes specifically for people to know? I mean, everything's streaming nowadays, and the day of the CD and the physical copies are going the way of the dodo. So, I mean, what are some of those changes in a contract? What does that look like?
I think the most recent changes that I've seen fall in the publishing world. With all of the stuff that's been going on with the performing rights organization, specifically ASCAP and BMI.
And again, no listener left behind.
Right.
Performing rights organizations are the ones who collect royalties on behalf of the songwriters for compositions played on radio, played live, on TV shows, etc.
Pandora.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into the weeds on this, but you can do a very quick Google search and find how many disputes there have been just in the last 2 years between ASCAP specifically and Pandora. That's been the most recent change.
Yeah.
But one of the issues from that has become the Department of Justice has been reviewing some laws that they put into place to restrict what BMI and ASCAP can and can't do. And as a result of that, there's been a question of, can one performing rights organization license to a third party, such as radio or Pandora, an entire song merely based on only representing one of those writers? So let me give you an example, because I know I probably just lost a lot of people. If there's a song and there's 2 writers on it, one writer's with ASCAP, one's with BMI, there's now been a question of, can ASCAP license to Pandora 100% of that song, even though ASCAP only represents one of those 2 writers? The issue being, or the concern being, it could be a race to the bottom of negotiating rates with that third party, because that PRO will want to get that license and get that income coming directly to them, as
Sure.
opposed to only their share.
Yeah.
And so just within the last 5 months, I've seen several publishers add very specific language in their songwriting agreements that explicitly states, you will, I'm paraphrasing here, you will make certain that your co-writers know that they cannot and do not have the authority to license your share of any songs you write with them. And that's never had to be in there before.
Sure.
But
Gosh.
we're having to do that because of this Department of Justice review that's going on. And, in theory, it's to, even though everybody knows the business has already worked that way for years, which is ASCAP, you license for your share, BMI, you license for your share. That's how it's always been done for 100 years. People are saying, well, maybe we need to start actually putting it in writing. That way, if the Department of Justice comes up, we can point to something in black and white to say, even though if you ask anybody in the business, this is how it's been done, here it is in black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk a lot about team on this show, and kind of I think the big takeaway from this is, as you guys are hearing out there, there's changes happening every day that affect you in ways that you don't even know. And if you're a creative, the best thing you can do is stay creative and keep creating. So you need people on your team like Jason who are helping navigate the ever-changing nature of the business, because even since I've got into it 5-6 years ago, it doesn't look anything like it did. So having somebody like Jason on your team focusing on that, and he's got his nose to the ground every day on this kind of stuff. So I think that's there's a commercial for you. So
thank you. This segment brought to you.
Yeah,
by,
exactly.
I always like to say to all of my clients, if you use if you're visual people, and most creative people are, you're the chair. What does a chair have? Usually it has, hopefully, at least 4 legs. Okay, so just go along with me on the visual here. Each of those legs represents a certain team member on your team. Most have an agent, business manager, and lawyer. If you're missing one of those legs on the chair, what happens? It's going to fall over.
Falls over, yeah.
And
unless it's an IKEA chair and has 3 legs.
Or 5, and then you're probably paying out too much of your income.
Yeah.
But, the point being, now more than ever, 20 years ago, I don't know that I would have sat here and said this. But because the business has changed so much, there's so much more that goes into any artist. And when I say artist, I'm not just limiting that to specifically an artist.
Could be producers, songwriters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into keeping that machine going, that it's so important for the business manager, agent, manager, and lawyer to be in contact, to know what's going on. Are we getting ready to go out on tour? Great. Okay, hey, lawyer, do we need to have paperwork done for that? Hey, agent, have you gotten the tour contract over to the lawyer to check out? Hey, business manager, guess what? We probably need to make sure that we've got a general liability policy in case we have a stage collapse or a bus wreck.
Which does happen.
Absolutely.
Very often.
Or if a bus breaks down. I see artists out there, please have your lawyers look at bus contracts. Those are some of the worst things.
Wow.
Yes. If a bus breaks down, the majority of those agreements require that the artist pay for a substitute bus to come out to them, even if the breakdown has nothing to do with them. Most artists starting out can't afford that. So, again, back to the chair example, it's so important these days to make sure your entire team is in constant communication. I mean, some of our bigger clients, we have weekly conference calls with the team. And there may be weeks where it's a 15-minute call because maybe there's not much to update on. There's weeks that may be 1 or 2 hours long because there's so much going on.
I think that's an important point you just hit on, that you want your team, whoever that consists of, to be in constant communication with each other, because I would venture to say a lot of the time you guys are saying, hey, you should do this, but then the accountant's like, well, that's going to affect the taxes, so you shouldn't do that, or you should do it maybe this way.
Right.
And then you guys can kind of work together on coming up with the best holistic solution.
Exactly. And even on the business management side, merely having a CPA may not be good enough. There are business managers who specifically work in the entertainment industry, just like lawyers. So it's really important to make sure that you have team members who are entrenched in the business. Again, because even I'm sure on their side, things are changing quite frequently.
It seems to me that a major through line for almost every artist or singer biopic that I've ever seen has some kind of major through line about they were killed on some deal that they signed in some seedy back alley, that has ruined half of their career, and they've spent the second half trying to just get all the rights back or get their dignity back. Because instead of letting anybody look over it, they just signed it, or they let their uncle look over it, and that wasn't right. Could you quickly, and again, we don't want to keep you all day because I'm sure you've got a couple conference calls to do the rest of the day. If you're looking at the difference between an entertainment lawyer or an entertainment attorney and just your run-of-the-mill attorney that you could walk into your office in your hometown, what are the differences that you or the artist needs to look at to see if they know their stuff or not, to be willing to hire them or to utilize them?
Wow, that great question, but it's also a hard one to answer because your question assumes that the artist knows the questions to ask, and the artist.
What are some of those questions?
Yeah.
When if I'm an artist, I don't have people on my team, what do I look for in a good attorney?
I think you've got to ask what other entertainment clients do you have? What's your track record? How long have you been working with them? And this goes for anything in the business. It not just a lawyer, but anybody you're looking to do work with. It could be you're interviewing a manager. Hey, manager, who are you working with? And asking yourself when that person answers the question, have you actually heard of any of those artists that manager is managing?
Sure.
If not, do you really want to be on that roster of other artists who you've never heard of if your goal is to break through? On the legal side, I think it's any lawyer should be honest with potential clients. They're either going to say, well, I primarily do general civil litigation, or I primarily do family and divorce work, but, I do a little bit of entertainment on the side. I'm not saying you shouldn't go with them. They may be the right person, but I think it's important to ask them, okay, what are some recent deals you've worked on? To try to really dig out of that person, how involved are they in the business? How recent have they actually been working on something? Because somebody who hasn't done a record deal in 5 years, most likely is not going to be in tune with what's been happening over the last 6 months. And that could have a huge impact on not just the negotiation of the deal, but the language that's in it that's going to protect you that you need.
Wow. Especially these days when you say that the laws and the rules and the way that the industry looks changes on a daily or weekly basis.
Right.
That's insane.
Let's flip that question on its head. Let's say we're talking to somebody out there who might be wanting to actually get into what you're doing on the behind the scenes, whatever you want to call it. So if somebody's a new attorney fresh out of law school, how do you get your first client if you don't have a track record?
Again, a great question, and I'm probably going to point every single one of my students to this podcast because I have to answer this question, I feel like 20 times every semester I teach. So this is great. I'm not going to lie, it's very, very difficult for a new attorney to get right into the entertainment world. It's such a competitive world, and just speaking frankly, unlike most other areas of law, there's not a lot of entertainment attorneys who have the time in the day to actually train up somebody. So what I usually tell my students, and I teach entertainment law at Stetson down in Tampa, where I went to law school every year. What I'm always telling my students is, first of all, when you're in law school, get as much exposure to intellectual property classes as you can. So copyright, trademark. Patent is a completely different ball of wax, but copyright, trademark, maybe a little bit of bankruptcy. Going back to one of the things I said before, being an entertainment attorney is not just about negotiating record deals or publishing deals. It's about being aware of other areas of law, that just to know, hey, maybe I need to pull in a bankruptcy lawyer because, to your point earlier of disaster deals, a lot of artists make a lot of money, but they don't know how to manage their money, so they end up needing to file bankruptcy. I've seen that happen many, many times. It's being aware of some of those other issues. So, get exposed to as many different areas as you can. Even with all of my experience before I went to law school, I didn't have a job in the entertainment industry right after law school. So what I did was I tried to find a job at a firm that would help me get as much experience as I could with negotiating, doing depositions, really being involved in those things, so it could be a stepping stone. So when I got to the point where I eventually I was ready to jump in.
Sure.
At the same time, I also, and this is a very important part, go to industry events, get known, meet people. That's how you're going to get your first client. You're going to get your first client because you were talking to somebody who happened to be, have some need in the business, and they like you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know of too many people, although I'm sure it's out there, who hire a lawyer because they couldn't stand them.
Yeah.
That may happen in certain areas of law.
Not in Nashville, though.
Right. But, you know, it's establishing relationships. Our business is a very relationship-driven community, not just in Nashville. It's a very small industry, and you are going to bump into the same people time and time again.
Yeah.
But that in mind, as a young attorney, be aware that you may need to have a mentor, you know, so to the extent you can find somebody who's been doing this for a while, at least get a relationship going. So if you do get that first client, you've got somebody you can bounce things off of to say, hey, I got this client, we're doing this deal, but I got to be honest, I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. Can you help me out with it?
Yeah.
I think that's gold right there. I mean, it's funny how this show always kind of goes back to that same theme of education, and education is not just going to college or getting a degree or whatever, reading books. It's having a mentor. And that applies to anything, whether you're an artist or producer or aspiring attorney. Finding the right mentor can collapse time frames by years.
Yeah.
Just meeting the right people.
I worked really hard while I was in law school to maintain all of the relationships I had developed when I was in Nashville, such that when I moved back to town, I hit the ground running to basically take anybody and everybody I could to lunch to say, hey, I'm back.
Sure.
If you know of anybody who needs anything, please keep me in mind. You know, I didn't want to be out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. And fortunately for me, you know, very quickly, I started getting those calls. And again, with this business being so relationship driven, I can tell you, if you do a bang up job for one client, you're probably going to find out that client is telling all of his or her friends, and eventually you're getting more and more calls because, hey, so-and-so said you just helped them with this. I've got this going on. Can you help me out?
Sure.
Word spreads fast.
Yeah.
In both good and bad ways.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I mean, you're constantly probably watching out for your next job and what your current job is, just because, you know, I mean, Nashville's a small town. The music business is a small business. Everybody knows everybody. So if you do a bad job for somebody, everybody's going to know it by the next day.
And you know, I'm not married. That's not a pitch for myself, but I'm
hear that, ladies?
I'm told that
rich, good-looking entertainment attorney.
I'm told that. Thank you.
37 looks like 17.
I thought you were talking about other people there for a minute. You know, I'm told that a piece of advice that parents usually give their newlywed kids is, you know, never go to bed angry, you know, with your mate. And one of the things that I try to uphold in my everyday practice is to always make sure my clients are happy. And if there's some sort of problem going on, I want to nip it because I don't want them thinking about it. Because it goes back to one of the very first things I said. I don't want to be one of the problems that's preventing them from writing or singing or touring. That's the last thing I want. So, you know, it's the communication with your client is just as important as it is with the entire team.
Yeah, and that's good.
Gosh. I quickly here wrapping up one last thing and digging in, just kind of asking the same question that we've asked the last two times, but from a little different perspective. As an artist, if you're realizing you're getting to the point where you need to have the services of an attorney, I'm assuming everybody can't call up Jason Turner and say, represent me. So what are, if they're moving to Nashville or New York or Chicago or Los Angeles and they want to find someone reputable, what's the first thing that they should do? Should they reach out to your law firm and or are you guys going to even entertain someone at a certain level versus
no
another?
Pun intended. I never like to say no as a blanket statement. So, you know, of course, people are welcome to call our firm. We have multiple lawyers there. If you're, and geography is not as important as what it used to be. You know, we are working on deals worldwide. Most people, especially beyond a certain age, are able to correspond and do work through email. So it doesn't matter if you're in London and your lawyer's in Nashville, or if you're in New York and your lawyer's in California. It just doesn't matter these days. My recommendation always is, if you're starting out, or let's say you got that first offer, if you don't have that mentor or manager or other people in your life yet, ask the label. The label is not going to give you names of people that they don't like working with. It's not to say that if they give you a name that person's not going to represent your interest just because the label gave you their name.
Sure.
That's the first good start. The other good start is do a simple Google search. If you're in Chicago, if it's really important that your lawyer be in Chicago, type in Chicago entertainment lawyer and see what pops up. Mm-hmm. Or there are certain websites like Super Lawyers. I know it sounds like a comic strip.
Maybe it should be.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, they don't provide capes to us. But Super Lawyers is an organization that essentially does some pretty intensive reviews of every area of practice. So if you need a great real estate lawyer, you can search by area of practice and geography, and that'll pull up people that they have vetted. So there's all kinds of lawyer review services out there that the vast majority are credible, that can help at least guide you to some people.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much, Jason. This has been a pleasure and eye-opening for me. There's so much that it's scary about the music industry when it comes to signing on the dotted line. So to have someone in your corner like you, it would be invaluable.
Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hey, we hope you've enjoyed this episode and will join us again soon on the Full Circle Music Show, the why of the music is.
Check us out at fullcirclemusic.org/podcast.